it's here. Bohemian Rhapsody. I went to see it last night. I was going to do a very short mini review and then review it properly today, but I was just so blown away by it and so over emotional from it, and I decided to wait today to gather my thoughts to give you a proper review. So if you're a casual movie fan, or if you just want to know what the movie's like, if you're not a viewer of my channel, the movie is an awesome, amazing, fantastic. Go watch it. That will save you listening to the prattle that follows, as I like to tell you my thoughts about the movie. If you don't know anything about Queen and the history, this may contain spoilers, but if you're a music fan, a Queen fan, you'll know their history, you'll know the ins and outs. So none of this should be spoiler territory, so just warning you, if you don't know that much, I'm going to go into some detail about certain things that happened within the band that were represented on screen. So I loved it. We obviously all know I loved it. The job that Rami Malek has done representing Freddie Mercury is just amazing. He has epitomised every movement. Okay, he doesn't look exactly like him, which I've heard people criticise, but really? How are you going to get someone that looks exactly the same? But he's got a really good likeness. But what he does have is those little mannerisms, is the way Freddie moved on stage, is his persona. Just the way he speaks is spot on. I mean, everyone knows that Freddie called everyone darling, and the way he says it, some of the Freddie put-downs in it just cracked me up. There's one particular put-down he gives to someone in his car. I'm not going to tell you what it is. If you watch it, look out for that put-down in the car. I busted out laughing. It was so funny. It was so typically Freddie. It was wonderful. So, Rami Malek is amazing. The actors that represent John Deacon and Brian May. Should I get these for you? I should. I can't remember everyone's name. Everyone knows me, knows my my memory issues. So we had Gwilym Lee played Brian May. Special mention has to go to him. He looked the most like Brian, you know, the person. He looked exactly like Brian May, but his mannerisms, his persona, his speech, his everything, the way he played his guitar, it was Brian May. His portrayal of Brian May was actually probably closer than Rami's portrayal of Freddie. And that's saying something, because Rami was amazing as Freddie, but maybe just because this guy looked more like Brian May, maybe Rami's performance was every bit as awesome, but it was uncanny, this guy's resemblance to Brian May, and his acting and his voice, the tone of his voice, the softness of his voice. John Deacon, let me get the little guy's name, Joseph Mazzello, that played John Deacon, again did a fabulous job. John Deacon was always the quieter member of the band, was always the one in the background. This movie actually did a really good job in actually bringing him out a little bit of his personality. Don't get me wrong, this is a biopic about Freddie. There isn't a lot went into about the rest of the band. It is mostly Freddie's life. The band are obviously in it, and the interactions within the band is all contained, but there is no back note to any, like Brian or Roger or John. Something I don't think that Roger and Brian were quite happy about. I think they wanted more about them in. But really, as far as I'm concerned, Freddie, you know, Queen would never have been what they were without Freddie. I think he gave them the final push that they needed to make them what they were. So would a story about Roger Taylor or Brian May's or John Deacon's life bring everyone to the cinema? Probably not. Compared to, obviously, hardcore Queen fans obviously would go to see it. But would your average cinema goer? No. Freddie just had the most interesting life, was the most interesting character, which is why it's mostly about him. But the Brian May portrayal and the John Deacon portrayal, spot on. If I had to give any, I'm sorry, I'm just looking for a name here. Why is this not at the beginning? John Deacon, Ben Hardy. Ben Hardy portrays Roger Taylor. He's the only one that I felt they didn't manage to get spot on. They got him well, but I don't feel that they got his sense of cheekiness as well as they could have. He was put across very much as the playboy, which is true. He was the hothead, the fiery one that usually butted heads with Freddie. Brian was the very consistent, laid-back, creative person alongside Freddie, and that's all put across. John was the quiet spectator. He wasn't afraid to speak his mind when he needed to, and I feel that they did really well with all of the personalities. I loved how they put across the message that Queen always had, which was none of us are the same. We're all very different, and Queen is a band for the outcasts that feel they don't belong, because we don't all belong together. We're different, but we're family. And it's so true. If you think about those individual members of Queen, they're all so different. Most bands, the band members are quite similar, but in this band they're nowhere near the same. And I didn't actually know that Roger Taylor was going to be a dentist. I don't know why I didn't know that, but I didn't. That's what he was studying to do before he joined the band. It goes through Freddie going into a club and seeing Roger and Brian performing in the band Smile, and being quite impressed and really liking it. And coincidentally, their band member or their singer left for another job because he didn't feel they were ever going to get anywhere. I wonder how that guy feels now. And they didn't want Freddie because Roger looked at him and said, "With your teeth? Nah." Something I didn't know, Freddie got a lot of abuse, got called Paki an awful lot. I hate that word. I really hate that word. Freddie obviously was from Zanzibar. He was not Pakistani, but he got a really hard time growing up being called that, being called disrespectful names. It's just, that word is not allowed near me in this house or anything else. But it seemed to be quite a thing in England at that time to use that word and to call people that name, which is just not acceptable. It went through them getting together, them struggling to become a band. The most interesting, it showed you how they made sounds. They wanted to be experimental. It showed you how they made sounds on certain records, like showed the recording of Bohemian Rhapsody and how it came together and where it came from. And it showed you when Freddie was waiting at a bus stop when he used to work at the airport when he was really young as a baggage handler, him penning the words of Liar, and just, oh my goodness. It showed you the Roger Taylor song, I'm in Love with My Car, that the rest of the band hated it and didn't want it to be released. Everyone had a part on the Night at the Opera, which is one of my joint favourite albums of Queen. My two favourite is A Night at the Opera and A Day at the Races. And A Night at the Opera is the actual one that they show the background of them making, which just made me so happy because I love that album so much. And it put across the sort of idea behind it, what they wanted. And their manager, not the manager, a big boss at EMI, refused to let them proceed as they wanted to make Bohemian Rhapsody the single. It was 6 minutes long. Radios had a cut off at 3 minutes, and he said, "No, we have to release I'm in Love with My Car." And the band said, "No, it's Bo Rap or nothing." This guy wouldn't let them do it. Now, what I didn't know when I watched this movie is the guy that's playing the EMI boss is Mike Myers. I didn't recognise him. And he's saying, and I'm chuckling along, not realising who it is, he says, "No, we need a song that teenagers can listen to and crank up when they're driving and can bang their heads." And obviously anyone who's anyone's going to be thinking about Wayne's World and that scene of Bohemian Rhapsody in the car. And it's Mike Myers saying it, and I didn't recognise him, and I still thought it was funny because obviously the reference to that. But there's, I could talk about half an hour about this. I'm trying not to. The cinema, the movie I went to see the most at the cinema that people cried at was Marley and Me. I think that's been beaten now. There were strangers sitting in this screening. I went to the first screening and there were complete strangers sitting across from one another, handing each other hankies. People were breaking down. You could really tell that that screen was full of Queen fans. I'm a die-hard Queen fan. I'm not I like Queen, they're a really good band. I have loved Queen since about the age of 4 or 5. I've got them tattooed on me, for Christ's sake. There you go. Queen has always been my favourite band. You hear me talk about Backyard Babies, that's because it's a band that's going, that's alive, but in my life Queen has always been number one. Freddie is, as everyone knows, one of only 2 people I've ever idolised, the other one being Billy Connolly. Freddie Mercury to me is a god. I'm sorry if you disagree, but I love the man. There will never be another one like him. He was so unique, talented, deep, artistic. I love the man. And this movie does such an incredible job of representing him as a person. It went into a lot of detail about his relationship and engagement with Mary Austin, which I'm really pleased that they did, because people find it really difficult to... Freddie's always labelled as gay. Freddie was bisexual. It goes into that relationship with Mary Austin and shows how they got together, shows the romance, shows the proposal, and it's all very beautiful. She stayed in his life right up until his death as one of his closest friends. It also shows when he met Jim Hutton, who went on to be his long-term partner, that obviously survived him when he passed. It shows how they met. It shows there was actually a really long gap between them meeting and getting back together, or getting together, as Jim really had Freddie's best interests at heart. It was during all of that massive parties that he was famous for throwing. And this movie really properly conveys one thing that a lot of people know, and that is the reason that he threw those parties is because he was so desperately lonely. Obviously his bandmates were off getting married and having kids. Mary had moved on with a boyfriend because he had come out to her and said, "Mary, I think I'm bisexual." And she says, "I know." You know, she was saying, "Say it to me, Freddie, tell me." And he told her, and he came out. And she was devastated, but she said, "What makes me really mad is it's not your fault, you can't help it." And she stayed as one of the closest people in his life. And I've always said that Freddie always loved Mary, and he always did, and till the day he died. And he wanted more than anything to make that relationship work, but it wasn't who he was. He couldn't. And she and Jim Hutton were the only two people, aside from the band themselves, that seemed to really have Freddie's best interests at heart. It had Paul Prenter, who was, people will know, and horribly, he's from Northern Ireland, and he's just such a horrible person. He was trying to pull Freddie away from the band to convince him to go on his own. He was the one pushing him towards, he was gay, he was pushing him towards relationships with, like, one night stands with all these individuals, and drugs and drink, and he destroyed the band. He pulled them apart. He pushed Freddie into that whole life of promiscuity, and all Freddie wanted was to have a cup of tea and to have some company and someone to talk to. And when he hit the big time and he bought a massive big house, all he had for company were his cats, and everyone knows how much Freddie loved cats. These cats had massive rooms to themselves, and it shows him telling Roger about this, and he's saying, "Well, stay for tea, please stay for tea, we can eat it off the floor, it just moved in." And Roger's like, "Freddie, I can't, I've got my wife and kids to get home to." And it portrays that desperate loneliness that Freddie had, and how he tried to fill it, and how Paul Prenter pushed things into his life to fill it that was not right for him. Jim Hutton was a working, like, drinks collector, waiter at one of his infamous parties, and Freddie was drunk and did something rather appropriate. He reached out and felt Jim's bum, and Jim, unlike everybody else who was hero worshipping Freddie, was like, "No, you don't touch me, you get your hands off me." And he laid it out for him, "Don't you dare," you know. They sat down and eventually they got talking, and there was obviously a real connection, there was obviously a real love there. It's that thing where you say, does love at first sight exist? Where I would always say no, lust at first sight does. But when those two met, there was a real connection that was more than lust. And Jim said to Freddie asked him out, and Jim said, "No, call me when you've decided to like yourself and put yourself first." Because he realised how messed up Freddie's life was. And he didn't have a number, and eventually Freddie does look him up again, and he has to go through all the Jim Huttons in the area, and there's a lot. But their first date, he brings Jim home to meet his really conservative parents, Indian parents, and also the relationship it shows between Freddie and his father. Freddie's name was Farooq Bulsara, not Freddie Mercury, and his father was really disappointed that he changed his name from Farooq to Freddie, and then when he changed his name from Bulsara to Mercury, it shows him being in the room with his dad, telling him on his birthday, and with all the band and with Mary, and it just really got into sides of things that aren't really, you know, shown, and his father's disappointment. And then later we have a scene where his father's finally proud of his son. And it's when Jim's there and he offers Jim a piece of cake or something. And it's just that very quiet acceptance of the fact he was gay. A very conservative, religious parents. And when he told his dad that he was doing Live Aid, his dad didn't want anything to do with his career, but he was always reading stuff in the papers. Oh, Freddie's manic romp parties and Freddie's gay and all this stuff. And when Freddie leaves on his way to perform at Live Aid with Jim beside him, his dad turns to his mum and says, "Put the telly on." And it's the first time that his dad has ever shown real love and pride in his son, and it just really touched me. It had me, the tears were flooding down my face to that part, because his son is going to perform a concert for the famine in Africa. Queen Ferry almost did not perform in that concert because Queen had broken up at that time. Freddie went to pursue his solo career, pushed by Prenter again, and he realised on his own in Munich that he'd made a mistake. Mary actually travelled all the way there to tell him about Live Aid because Paul would not even pass on the message. He said, "I thought you'd be making embarrassment of yourself, you know, it would waste your time." Maybe you forgot that Freddie was from Zanzibar, so something for African famine, you know, not the mistake to tell Freddie not to do it. Freddie obviously really wanted to do it, but at this time he had separated from the band and they were very, very angry and bitter at him, and it shows the meeting where his old manager gets all the band together so they will talk to Freddie, played by Aidan Gillen, Littlefinger from Game of Thrones. And it shows Freddie going back, you know, on bended knee, trying to get the band back, and it's a really funny exchange, and the band are not taking any shit, but they get back together for Live Aid. And they only have a week or 2 weeks to get ready, and Freddie's voice isn't what it should be. And the one scene that had the entire cinema in tears, I really did not want them to concentrate on the AIDS thing. They did go into him being diagnosed, realising he had it. And it also actually, and this is something I didn't know, it shows him telling his bandmates, and he tells them at that first rehearsal when they get back together and they're preparing for Live Aid. Freddie's voice isn't what it was, he's struggling. Obviously it's affecting his lungs. And he says, "Look boys, I want to tell you something before anyone else does," and he tells them. And when you've seen the relationship they have with one another throughout the movie and you see their reaction to him telling them that he has got AIDS, it's... somebody's moving a table downstairs. It's just heartbreaking, the reactions from each of the guys, and Freddie in turn, him saying to them, "I don't want to be a victim, I don't want your sympathy. I want to make what's left of the rest of my life good, you know, I want to celebrate." And it's so sad. So God, I cried, and you know, and I cried when I watched the Live Aid performance because it was them back on top again. It was, America didn't want to know at that stage because they had done the video for I Want to Break Free, and obviously it was in drag. The song was written by, I believe, Brian, and the drag suggestion was Roger's, but they blamed it on Freddie because he was gay, because he was bisexual. Oh, cross-dressing Freddie, drag act, this is obscene. And America actually banned that video, which was shown openly on UK TVs, and they still remained in UK favour, but they had gone down the toilet in America by this stage. They weren't popular anymore. The song didn't really, you know, rate on the charts at all in America. But Live Aid brought them back from the brink. And seeing them on that stage together after that break, and we all know the job that Freddie did, that Queen did at Live Aid, and again I cried because Rami and Malek had got so close to Freddie on that day, even down to, he must have learnt to play piano, and he plays piano the same way Freddie does, with his fingers held the same way Freddie did. He has studied the tiniest little eccentricities about Freddie and he has got those across perfectly. Excuse me. I cannot say enough good things about this movie. It's well researched. the characters are going into just the right amount. I could have watched 3-4 hours going into different members of the band, but that's me. I love Queen. But it gets across a lot of things about Freddie that have always been misunderstood, that have not been properly presented. People have never got the whole Mary Austin thing. People never really knew what a positive influence and what an awesome person Jim Hutton was, and this is all put across. Paul Prenter, the asshole, went and sold loads of stuff to the media about Freddie when Freddie sacked him. Freddie found out he'd kept Live Aid from him. Freddie just then realised, this guy's no good for me. And he didn't realise to this point. And he sacked him. He says, well, that's it, you're gone. And that's all gone properly into. And they couldn't have done a better job with this movie. It's amazing. A Star Is Born had been my favourite movie of the year till this point. This blows it out of the water. I'm just really annoyed that they didn't put this in the big screen. The big, like, posh sound system screen. A Star Is Born still playing in that. But maybe because this was like a prequel, like the first screening, maybe that's why. I'll maybe go back and see it again. But oh my god, this movie is just amazing. The guy that directed it, whose name I've forgotten, Bryan Singer, he actually ended up getting sacked with 2 weeks left to go. Rami Malek was getting really irate at him because he wasn't turning up to shooting. He was really erratic in his behaviour, he wasn't being professional, and in the end he was sacked. None other than Dexter Fletcher, actually, he did the last 2 weeks of shooting, all the post-production, but they still have only listed Bryan Singer as sole director, which I don't feel is right, to be fair. But he did do an amazing job while he was there. What he has done, the Live Aid set was the largest set he has ever worked on, and he replicated that to a T. Even the scenes in that audience watching Live Aid made me cry. The reactions the people had to him, the love they had for him, it's just incredibly well done. I cannot stress enough, Kyla, I'm sorry, I know this is so long, but I couldn't not do a proper review of this movie because it's Queen, for God's sake, guys. I can't say enough good things about this. It's spot on. It puts across the things that people maybe didn't know, that all Queen fans knew. It puts across those people that were important in his life, those people that missed the boat, those people that were negative influences. It puts that relationship the band had together, and it shows Freddie being arrogant and being stupid and being egotistical. It shows all that. It doesn't show that him as this like lily white sort of like massive icon. It does show him fucking up, but it also shows him going back cap in hand and saying, I've been an asshole, I did wrong, you know, and he agrees to the terms the band want to have him back immediately with no quibble. He recognises his behaviour, and sadly that behaviour happened because of Paul Prenter's influence over him. Paul was gay, Paul was from Belfast, Catholic family, and he very much always pushed to Freddie, we're the same. I'm from a conservative Catholic Irish family and I'm gay. I don't fit in. Me and you are the same. And he manipulated Freddie and always kept things from him that would have been good for him and promoted things that were bad for him. And that's really well put across in this movie, as is Freddie's mistakes, as is the band dynamic, his relationships, everything. I love it. I cannot say enough good things about this. If you're a Queen fan, you must see this in the cinema. You will cry. If you're a proper, real, honest-to-goodness Queen fanatic like I am, you will cry. Freddie's death affected me tremendously. I know that's ridiculous. He's a famous person. I didn't know him. I'm not the sort of person to get beat up about everyone I admire passing away, but Freddie to me he's just someone that I've had a real affection for since I was a really young child, and that will never go away. I was 14 when he passed away, and one of my biggest life regrets is that I have never and will never see Queen. I refuse to see Queen without Freddie. I know some people disagree with that, I don't care. Queen to me will never be Queen without Freddie. It's simple. Even the name was for Freddie. Queen, you know? He designed the logo himself. I think now that the young lad's doing a great job, I love the fact that they remember Freddie, that they talk about him, that they don't leave him out. I love all that. But John Deacon had the right idea. He said, Without Freddie's involvement, it's not Queen, and he stopped. And that's what I wish Roger and Brian had have done. Even if they went on with Adam, forgotten his surname. That's not disrespectful, I've just honestly forgotten. Lambert, Adam Lambert. They could have called themselves A Night at the Opera, Bohemian Rhapsody. They could have called themselves anything, but to have this real love and affection for Freddie that I have, you cannot replace him. He cannot be replaced. I don't care what band replaced who, AC/DC, don't care. It's not the same as Queen and Freddie. Yeah. And I have to go now because my tea's ready. Isaac?
Yep.
Are you up to get me for my tea?
Yep.
Right. Okay, I'm coming now. I'm just finishing a video. So Isaac's now going to sit and look at me finishing a video. Do you want to come in the video? Isaac's coming in the video. I'm telling them about Queen. It's a 12A, you could have seen it.
I want to see
You
it.
could have seen a bit of good music. I think you'd be bored though. It's all about Freddie. So yeah, that's my review of Bohemian Rhapsody. Go see it. You will regret it if you don't. It is amazing. I'd really like to hear anyone's viewpoints that's seen it. Are you going to see it? Do you want to see it? Let me know below in the comments. And if you've listened thus far to me waffling, thank you. I'm now going to go and have some gammon. Over a night from Lisa Lives.